it's still an ongoing practice of mine to become a better listener. I'm always focused on becoming a better listener. The podcast gives me the perfect platform to continue that journey that I started all those years ago in the corporate world to become a better listener.
Welcome to Connect with Confidence. I'm Kerry Phipps, and I am so excited to jump into today's conversation. So I have on the line with me Mark Philpott. Mark, I'm going to let you do your bio because I've got like such a list, and you have such an extraordinary life, and you still have like so much extraordinary life ahead of you. So I'm going to hand over to you. How do you want to be introduced?
Hi everyone, my name's Mark Philpott. I live on a sailboat with my puppy dog Oscar. There you go. How did I go?
Good morning, Oscar, and good morning, Mark.
Thank you very much for having us on your show. And we're both here because Oscar's sitting right next to me, Kerry. So he's enthralled in what Daddy's talking about today.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, one of the first things I want to do is recommend that people go and check out your TED Talk. And where was that exactly?
That was in Hong Kong. And, I really like to... I'm a fan of TED Talks and all the rest of it, and it's a great experience to do something like that. But the reality of it is, it was 10 years ago, and as I keep saying to people, a lot has changed in my life since I got up and said that talk. So take it in context for what it was 10 years ago, and yeah, it was an enjoyable time and experience.
Yeah, and in that you reflected on your 22 years of corporate work, but the opportunities that you had to travel in that time and the people that changed you as you connected around the world, which really intrigued me. And now you're the global business podcast host at Global Travel Channel, which you so generously invited me on just a month or so back, which was amazing. You're interviewing people all over the world. So I'm excited to ask you questions about how you're connecting, what are you learning from people, what are you learning about yourself in this journey. And I've listened to your podcast a number of times, Mark, and you ask so many great questions.
Oh, thank you.
And I thought I have to beware that Mark might just turn the tables on me today.
I have a list prepared, Kerry.
Because you get so into the conversation, and but I really do want to hear your stories today. So do you want to maybe take us back to your first trip, your first adventure into connecting with people from a different place?
Well, I probably can't remember the very first one, but I think you've been very insightful in talking about my journey through the corporate world, and I was very fortunate. I ended up in a company that was instrumental about global business, and the company is called DHL, the world's largest logistics and supply chain management organization. And it was through that career path that I was given the opportunity by working hard and getting promoted into different positions within the company that I was able to experience the world, I guess, in a very different way than what a lot of people get to experience it. And that is traveling to over 160 countries around the world and doing business, meeting new people, making new friends, seeing cities and countries like I'd never seen them before, and also doing business in those countries. And I think when you add the dimension of doing business as well, it gives you a completely different insight to how that country operates as a nation. And I thoroughly enjoyed that at the time. It was like every day was a massive learning curve. Back in the day, I used to love flying. It became a chore, but I used to love it. And I used to love the excitement of walking out of an airport into a new place and going, right, what have you got to offer me? Yeah. And just really embracing everything that was there. So there were a lot of common traits that I saw in humanity as I traveled, and I think that was the first one is our desire and our appetite for connection.
Yes.
I think people just love to, first of all, people love to talk about the place where they live and where they work. People love to showcase the great things about their country, their city, their town, their village, their community, even their office, and the company they work for. That was something that I really learned a lot. And let's face it, a lot of people are defined by their identity linked to their job and what they actually do. And I think that's really a fascinating part of humanity, because underneath that, and I give you the analogy where you spend all day doing business together in a foreign country, and then you go out for dinner at night, and the experience is completely different because people start talking about their personal lives. They start talking about their families, whereas during the day it was all business, or for the majority of the time. And I loved that transition in humanity. I used to call that a smorgasbord of love, because the love started to permeate across the dinner table about, my family and what I was doing, and what my hobbies were. And my little girl went to a soccer tournament in the weekend and did this. And I used to love that kind of stuff because it made me feel more connected to those people. And because I was going back to these places on a regular basis, it wasn't a one-off trip. I used to go to these countries all the time. And therefore, those relationships would evolve. And, some of them would go into lifelong relationships, like I've got with many of those people today still.
Wow.
And some of them would be one or two trips, and that would be the end of it, because, we all come into each other's lives for a reason and a season, right? So,
yeah.
I found that part of what I did and what I was doing around the world fascinating, because it was just such an amazing richness that I knew that I wouldn't have got any other way if I'd stayed in one country all my life and just worked in a job, and it was a completely different experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And Mark, when you were saying people love to share about their place, their residence, their country, their office, I heard you say that, and I thought there are some people who might be reluctant, or they might not see the value of their place, but what you've taken is an appreciation for what they have. I think if you ask them questions about their place with enthusiasm and appreciation, then they're so happy to share, because you start to highlight to them how valuable that is. But sometimes people don't actually value their own place, do they? Have you seen that too?
Yeah, I have. And it's an interesting point you talk about there, because I think it comes down to the art of communication.
Yes, and that's what I see, that you
Yeah.
take that interest in people, which is powerful.
And I think that during that time, I was a bit of an oxymoron, because the role that I played within the company was a very extroverted commercial development guy. So I was out there doing presentations to big companies and all that sort of stuff. But when I put myself in that personal space, in that dinner environment, I used to practice my listening skills, and I used to shut up and just listen to people.
Yeah.
And that was something that I was conscious of. I wanted to improve that skill set in myself as a human being, because I felt that I got more out of that interaction, the better listener I became. And when you listen to people intensely and they know that you're genuinely listening, from my experience, they will open up and they will give you more and more deep information. And that's what I love to get out of people. So I found myself sitting at a table where, many men were telling me their problems with their relationships, and women were telling me all the problems with their men in their life, and what the boss was saying and doing, and all these sorts of conversations were going on, and it was happening at times in different languages. And it was really, really amazing.
Wow. And that listening is what I hear on your podcast too. You really listen to people at a deep level. And, we don't see each other's faces when we're on a podcast. It's just like a phone call, and we hear things, and we hear support. We hear that somebody wants our story. And so I hope that I can serve you in that way today too, as you do for your guests. So, Mark, I'm just wondering, when you said you had this, extroverted role, did you always see yourself as an extrovert? Can you take us back to early days?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And in fact, I'm writing a new book at the moment, and I just wrote a chapter last night that talks about this, because I'm actually a really introverted guy, and you wouldn't really know it in some levels, because I put myself out there on social media and do all those things. But I've been a loner for a lot of my life, and I grew up in a family environment where I spent a lot of time by myself. I played a lot of sports, and they were very individual sports. So I did things like, cycling and playing tennis and things like that, where I was always by myself. And when I started the journey in the corporate world, although I had responsibility for a lot of people, I did a lot of my travel by myself. So I found that I had to push myself out of my comfort zone to be the guy that stood up in front of a boardroom of people and talked about, global deals and all the rest of it. And some people looked at me and said, wow, that just comes so naturally to you. I can tell you it didn't. And it took a lot of years of building self-confidence and working on myself and getting mentored by people as well. That was the other thing, learning from others and picking up little bits and pieces of skill sets and how to overcome those things that I felt were holding me back. So, quite an interesting perspective. And even today on the podcast, I get a lot of people say to me, well, you come across as very confident and understanding about a lot of things, but put a lot of hard work into that, a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of time alone to delve into people, because I'm genuinely interested.
Yes, and I think when we're really interested in somebody, when we have this purpose to connect, to share stories, whatever you would articulate as your purpose, when that is clear, then that nervousness, that inhibition, that falls away, doesn't it? Because you get intrigued.
Yeah, I think we're in a fascinating period of history right now. If you look around the world, in particular to the subject you're talking about, Kerry, if you look at the leaders around the world at the moment, how they're dealing with their countries on this pandemic level, and you'll see leaders who have embraced their nation as a community of people, and people who are at one with them. And then you've got the authoritarian type of approach that this is what you shall say and do, and where you'll go and at what time. And I can't help but say, you've got to look at New Zealand, my home country, where there is really a family spirit behind what they've been able to achieve with taking on this virus. So I think that's what it's all about. If leaders and people in those positions are able to get the audience to really buy into whatever messaging they're trying to communicate, that's the key to success for me, I think.
Absolutely. And I wanted to take a moment to celebrate New Zealand. And I was thinking this morning, what is it about New Zealand? There are some people in the world might not even really know where it is, but there are so many extraordinary people that come out of that place. You've got like award-winning filmmakers, and then people come from all over the world to New Zealand to make films and to celebrate the nature and the people there. So what is it about New Zealand?
I think there's two things, Kerry. I think the first one is that, back in the day, in my generation, I think it's still the case today that, when you get to that ripe old age of, 16 or 17, you throw a backpack on and you take off out into the world. And the Kiwi appetite for travel is immense, and it's always been something where, okay, we want to get out there and see what's happening. And New Zealanders are very adventurous, but they're also great inventors. And if you look back through the history of the world, you'll see that a lot of inventions have happened in New Zealand. And there's been extraordinary things done by New Zealanders because of that. The other thing is, because we do live at the end of the world, so to speak, there is this mentality of survival of the fittest. And as a result of, New Zealand's got I wouldn't say it's got a harsh climate, but it's got a climate that makes you fairly rough and rugged. It's got an agricultural background, so there's a lot of farmers and a lot of people connected to the land, whether it be fishing or whatever in New Zealand. And I think that's part of the DNA of it as well. So I think when people have, had a fairly difficult life and upbringing, they get out there and they see the world, how other people are living and what they're doing. That all molds into a wonderful recipe, I think, for the things that you see coming out of New Zealand.
Absolutely. And you just reminded me of a movie that I insisted my dad come and see, because he's a farmer, he doesn't go to the cinema. And I said, but you have to see this movie called The World's Fastest Indian.
Oh, Burt Munro.
Yes.
He's my absolute role model, is Burt. In fact, I met Burt when I was a young guy, and it was absolutely by chance. I didn't know anything about him at all. I was down in Invercargill, where he's actually from at the time, and I was taking a ferry across to Stewart Island, which is at the bottom of the world. Yeah, we ran into him literally, and what an incredible film. I think everyone in the world should watch that film, because it's got so much about humanity. It's got so much about desire and courage and determination and achieving your goal in life, no matter what gets put in front of you. It's really a brilliant movie.
Yes, and I will never forget the scene where he's sitting in the car and he quotes Roosevelt, the man in the arena.
Yes.
Where he just starts saying, it's not the critic who counts. And you don't realize that it's actually a quote until he's, it's the poetic nature of that. But it's just his story in that moment.
Yeah.
He is in the arena. He is not caring about who's criticizing, and he goes and makes history. So, yes, I'm with you in recommending that everybody sees that movie.
And going back to what you just asked me about, what is it that makes New Zealanders what they are? I think Burt Munro is just absolutely atypical of that. I think that, the determination that he showed and you know what, that record that he set still holds today. And
Yes.
that's extraordinary in itself, to think that no one in all these years afterwards, what is it, 60 years or so since that happened, that no one's
Wow.
even beaten his record, how many records stand for 60 years,
I know, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. And my dad was actually at a skydiving meet in Arizona shortly after we'd seen the movie, and he met this New Zealander and he said, I watched this movie recently. And he said, yeah, Burt Munro. The
There you go.
world's
I think
fastest
everyone in New
Indian.
Zealand knows Burt Munro too, by the way. So I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
everybody will say it's his neighbour or, whatever.
Yeah, well, that skydiver did say that he, used to sit on the beach and watch him, riding up and down the beach. So just going back to, these moments where you were teaching yourself to really listen and to connect and to present yourself confidently. You mentioned mentors as, one of the supports, but I wondered, do you want to take us through some other tips, even in the moment kind of tips when people are stepping up, pushing themselves out of the comfort zone as you did?
I think in terms of being a trailblazer in that space for yourself, I think everybody's a trailblazer in their own life journey when it comes to that, because you've got to trial things that work for you. I think there's no use.
Yeah.
You've got to be a little bit careful with this mentoring thing, because I think in terms of mentoring things, sometimes mentors can give you great technical advice and give you framework and structure. But at the end of the day, the implementation and the sustainability comes down to yourself. How accountable are you to practicing new things and doing things that work for you? You've only got to look at social media today. There's so many different strategies out there that people use for social media. And what's everybody trying to achieve? Is it saying, notoriety? Hi, here I am. This is who I am, what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. Is it ego? What is it that's actually driving some of that? And I think in terms of when I was focusing on, as I still do, and if I go back to your question, why I do the podcast, it's still an ongoing practice of mine to become a better listener. I'm always focused on becoming a better listener. The podcast gives me the perfect platform to continue that journey that I started all those years ago in the corporate world, to become a better listener. And it served me so well in all aspects of my life, whether it be relationships, whether it be even to my dog. My dog sits there and looks at me, and we have these stare off competitions where he's looking at, in my eyes, I'm looking at his. There's no communication obviously going on other than that, but we're actually listening to each other. And I find that fascinating with animals as well. So I think some of the tips that I got from other people were, I used to love, Kerry, spending time with elderly people.
Yes.
I just love the wisdom and also the non-ego based communication that they're about, elderly people. I used to get so much from my grandparents. My grandfather was my hero when I was growing up.
Yes.
And I would sit and listen to him for hours and hours and hours, talking about all different aspects of life. So I think it was kind of embedded in me when I started this journey of, living and working and traveling around the world for my entire life. I got into this mold of connecting with people that were like my grandfather, who were able to sit down and talk to me at a level where, one, I felt as though I was connected on the same level. And two, they weren't about expressing their views in an egotistical way. They were about sharing their experience in a way that was both beautiful, but also take it or leave it. You take from this what you want to take, and leave the rest. So I found that those people, and when we label them as mentors, but really everybody we come across in our life is a mentor in one way or another. And no matter what form of communication we have with someone, whether it be like on a podcast, whether it be face to face walking down the street, I've had some amazing conversations here with sailors that I bump into from all different parts of the world who have a different perspective on sailing. And, I'm learning to sail through other people's eyes and experience. So that's a beautiful thing as well.
Yeah, that's so valuable. And you mentioned, like, when you were saying trying things for yourself, trying, and you mentioned sustainability. So let's have a chat about that too, because, if we try and connect like somebody else does, if we try and do anything like somebody else, it's exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us more about what sustainability in your connecting looks like?
Yeah, well, I guess I asked the question back in terms of what's the point of copying someone else? That's already being done, right? Somebody's already doing it. Like, not everybody has to be a Joe Rogan on podcasts, right? Because Joe's doing a great job of being Joe. And I want to do a great job of being Mark Philpott, whatever that means in the
Yes.
context of the world, right?
Yes.
So I think in terms of sustainability is, look, I'll share something with you, Kerry, that a lot of people don't know. For the last 10 years, I haven't earned $1 of income from anything in my life.
Wow.
Okay. So I've been doing everything in the last 10 years that I'm passionate about for no financial reward, because I got to a stage in my life where I didn't want money to drive what I was all about.
Mm.
So I've turned down a lot of offers to do lots of different things to make money.
Mm.
But what was more important to me was to create the lifestyle that I have today and do the things that I get out of bed and do every day because I love doing it.
Mm.
And I know through doing that, that the sustainability, and when I talk about sustainability, I don't talk about it from a financial point of view. I talk about it, is this what I'm doing today going to drive me to get out of bed and have a smile on my face tomorrow?
Mm.
And as long as I can honestly, authentically answer that as a yes to myself every day, then I know I'm on the right track.
Mm.
So, yeah, in terms of, I'm not suggesting that people need to live without money, and I don't live without money. I'm comfortable with what I've made in the past and done and created and invested and all the rest of it. So, all I'm just saying is I'm sharing that I didn't allow money to be the key driver of
Yeah.
my sustainable life going forward. I wanted to create the life that I wanted with the passions that I'm passionate about and do that as my mainstream life every day.
Mm. Mm. And something that I've noticed recently in your social media, is your health journey. You've been sharing more about that, and that energy. When you said you wake up in the morning, ready to go, it sounds like you are really looking at sustainability and being your best. It's been a focus for some time now.
Well, at the end of the day, health is all we have, right?
Yeah.
So again, in writing my current book, it's about the last 25 days of my father's life and watching
Mm.
his demise through poor health and
Mm.
sitting by his bedside 24 hours a day for that entire period of time.
Mm.
And what that lesson taught me was, I can run around and make 1,000 podcasts and do all this and do all that, but if I'm not healthy and if I'm not
Mm.
enjoying that process. So a lot of the journey that I've been on, Kerry, has been about not establishing myself as a podcaster, not establishing myself in any context in a business sense, but becoming more of the authentic person that I want to become. And that means
Mm.
spirituality. It means good health,
Yeah.
looking after myself, and also developing loving relationships. Because if I talk about back to my corporate life that we spoke about before,
Mm.
those memories and those relationships and those connections that I have a global family of connections that I have, which
Mm.
mean everything to me. They will always be more important than what I do every day, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah.
So yes, I've been putting a lot of emphasis into that part of my life, and I will continue to do so when I go forward, because I just think it's all we have really at the end of the day, is that's what we
Mm.
have.
Mm. And how do you feel that it impacts your connecting with others?
Oh, positively. I've since I've been, and look, again, I was really reluctant to put myself online talking about this health thing that I'm going through, because
Mm.
there's a zillion videos out there about people doing health stuff and all the rest of it who have
Mhm.
much more, intellect than I do about that subject. But I just thought, look, I'm 55 years old. I was obese. I was angry. I was frustrated with who I was. I was getting lazy in different areas of my life. And I woke up literally one morning and said to myself, this is not you, mate. Get yourself together. And you're the only one that can hold you accountable for this.
Mm.
And the core denominator for me was sugar, because I had been, addicted to processed sugar all my life.
Wow.
And I knew that, and I'd been living with that addiction, and I'd been living in denial. And I
Mm.
thought, right, hang on a minute. If you get on these podcasts and you listen to all these people doing amazing things and they inspire you in all sorts of different ways, but you're not living the best possible version of yourself, why not? Why aren't you?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
So all those things came together in a crescendo of a moment, and people call that an epiphany or whatever. But
Yeah.
I woke up and said, "Hey, you got to change this."
Mm.
And as a result of doing that, now I'm getting emails from all over the world with people saying to me, "Oh, how did you get started? And what are you cooking every day? And how much exercise do you do?"
Mm.
And while I can share that, it goes back to, what are you prepared to do for yourself?
Yeah. So you had a conversation with yourself that
Yeah.
that's a
Oh,
turning moment.
yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate that you are encouraging other people to have that conversation with themselves as well. Like, what are they going to try for themselves, and not just take on somebody else's
Yeah, we
way
have
of
to be
doing
careful that
things.
we're not preaching to people. That's what I think. I think once we get up
Mm,
on the pedestal and we start saying, hey, you should do this,
mm,
I think that's dangerous territory. And I
yeah,
think it's a case of I'm only putting myself out there in respect to saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. It's working for me. I'm feeling fantastic, and leaving it at that. And if people want to, take something from that, fantastic.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark. And I wanted to ask, are there some special people in your world that you'd like to acknowledge or give a shout out to?
Oh, the list is huge. The list is huge. Actually, I
Yeah,
want to give a shout out to my dad who's passed away, and
yeah,
yeah, he's inspiring me at the moment to write my book that I'm writing, and there's a lot of internal Mark Philpott built into that. So I want to thank him
yeah.
for giving me the opportunity to be his son,
Oh, wow.
and to allow me to become the person that I am.
That's so beautiful, Mark. And what was your dad's name?
Barry
Barry Philpott.
Barry Philpott. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Amazing.
Barry with a Barrie, not a Barry, which many people
Oh,
spell.
lovely. I appreciate the IE.
Yes,
Oh,
you do.
that's beautiful, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I want to encourage everyone who's listening to find and follow Mark online. We'll have all the links in the show notes. And I've just felt with every conversation that we've had, Mark, there's been a couple of quick Facebook voice messages, and then the podcast interview that I did with you for the Global Travel Channel. You asked me great questions, unpacked things that I think I haven't shared before, and I hope that you've enjoyed sharing today with our audience, with our listeners, our friends around the world. And I know I have really found it very inspiring and useful. So thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
There is, Kerry. I would like to wish you all the very best with your podcast journey. You're a phenomenal person, and I know you love helping people. And I know through this particular platform, you're going to go on to change many people's lives. So I want to wish you all the very best for that. And thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you, Mark.